start with the most important thing, Joey, which is uniforms. 1999, I believe that was when Oregon kind of decided to make the radical change. You were there for it. So my first question is, what are your thoughts on what I'd call the classical Oregon uniform, the yellow helmet, the interlocked UO, the green jerseys, and what I knew Oregon as a kid growing up? What do you think of those uniforms?
I loved them. I mean, as someone who grew up in Oregon, that was part of my childhood. I mean, that was I was going to say that was what we saw on Saturdays, but in reality, we didn't see a whole lot of Oregon football because, remember there was only one game on TV and very rarely did the Ducks make television. So, in all honesty, my favorite combination was the yellow helmet, the white jersey, and the green pants. That was the perfect combination of those. We call them retro now, right? Like we've actually had a revamp of those uniforms. So I think they're technically retro, but that was my favorite combination of all of them. But that was my childhood right there. That was it.
Yeah, that's how I grew up in the Midwest, born in Iowa City, grew up west of Minneapolis. And so we almost never saw Oregon on TV, the Civil War, maybe the Washington game, maybe. But my dad had old college football magazines, preview magazines lying around. And I remember seeing like Bill Musgrave from '87 in the Oregon uniform. And then it got in the early 90s. I loved those Oregon uniforms. Your combination was fantastic when they added the green pants, like mid 90s. And I thought they looked great, but we've moved on. We're now like old guys talking about uniforms right now. So my question, I guess, is what the Ducks are doing now. They've really pushed a new they're leading this in college football. Nationally, we're seeing new uniforms all over the place. So for Oregon as a football program, what do you think this new era of uniforms has meant to them and where they are now?
I don't want to turn this into a bigger conversation than I'm sure the question was. But the uniforms themselves and what they've turned into now are truly just like a piece of the Oregon football puzzle, right? You mentioned it, and I'll go back a little bit. You mentioned Bill Musgrave.
Yeah.
That was truly when things started, let's lay the foundation, right? If here is where Oregon is right now, and the uniforms kind of come in somewhere around here. It all started with Bill Musgrave back in, he came in 86, 87. And they he took them to their first bowl game in, 173 years, it seemed like. And, the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, and you'd have thought the entire state hopped in the car and drove down to Shreveport, Louisiana for that bowl game. And it was such a monumental thing.
Yeah.
And then there was the Freedom Bowl right afterwards. But those two games turned into the recruiting classes that brought in the Kenny Wheatons and the Ricky Whittles and the Dino Filias and the, go through the list of those, of that 94 Rose Bowl team. That became Kenny Wheaton. That was what was the, kind of the next step in Oregon football, which was the pick against Washington. Right. Which was really the turning point of the program. Those games, 94, 95, Rose Bowl, Cotton Bowl, became the recruiting classes that I was a part of, right? That turned into the stretch from 99 to 01, where we went 9 wins, 10 wins, 11 wins, and really jumped onto the national scene, and people started paying attention to us. That was the opportunity where the uniforms came in. Right. So that once we had the eyes of the country, once people were actually starting to pay attention to the little guys out west, they changed up the uniforms and threw me on a billboard in New York City.
Yeah.
So now the entire country is watching. And now it's not just the college football fans, the true diehard, dads who are, middle-aged and have kids playing Pop Warner on the weekends, but they started thinking about the kids, the next generation, the next recruiting class. And how do you bring them in? If you're a kid in Florida, you're a kid in Texas, you don't care that Oregon beat Washington. You don't care that, Oregon beat Oregon State. That doesn't resonate with you, right? Because you're sitting there watching, Texas, Oklahoma, or you're watching Florida, Georgia, whoever it is. But what does catch your eye is a flashy uniform, is something different, is something outside the box. And that's where those uniforms came in, right? Once we'd laid the foundation, once we'd brought in a couple recruiting classes and grabbed the attention of the country, now it became, what do you do to keep it?
Yeah.
And so those uniforms caught the attention of the 10, 11, 12-year-olds, who then became the next recruitable class that became the recruiting class that went to the 2010 BCS national championship game against Auburn, right? And that national championship game appearance became the Marcus Mariota recruiting class, which became the next appearance in the championship game, right? All of these, we'll call them stepping stones.
Yeah.
Were very, they were on purpose, right? This wasn't just hey, let's get some new uniforms. Why not? There was thought that went into it. There was a reason. And while, and here's the kicker, right? In all these steps, whether it was putting me on a billboard in New York, whether it was going with flashy uniforms, all these things they made a splash.
Yeah.
But they all would have fallen flat had the team not performed.
Yes.
Right? Had we gone 6-5 in 2001, people would be looking back at that billboard and say, boy, that was the biggest waste of money. How stupid was it? But but it wasn't. We went 11-1 and I ended up as a Heisman finalist. Right. The uniforms start coming out and all the kids, start loving Oregon, and Oregon becomes a national brand. But if we would have fallen flat and didn't go to the BCS championship game, or Marcus didn't win the Heisman, then you look back and say, God, that was just a stupid way to draw attention, and they're no better than they were. And so while the uniforms, just, let's tie up my long answer. Like I said, this is kind of a bigger picture thing.
Yep.
The uniforms are part of it, right? And they've evolved into something that has become kind of part of the Oregon identity. But had Oregon not played well enough, or had they not excelled? Let's put it that way. What is it? I saw a stat in the last 20 years, I think, Oregon has twice as many conference championships as Washington has wins against Oregon, right? We have 8 conference championships. Let's call it 8 conference championships since we started going with these uniforms. And that's something, right? There aren't too many. There aren't too many programs out there that can say they've won the conference championship just about every other year. And so while there is a flash and there is a novelty to them, it's been backed up on the field, which has allowed them to continue to do it.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer, actually. And that is what it's about, and what people need to understand about why Oregon does that, and how conscious an effort it was. I don't have all the details. You obviously know much more, but I know that Nike re-involved themselves with the program in the years after that Rose Bowl, the 94 team, 95 Rose Bowl. By the way, I think I said 95 Washington game earlier. 94, I know that. Don't get all over me, whoever watches this. It was the 94 game to pick. I know. Yeah. So, that's an absolutely brilliant answer. So I guess my question for you, just quick follow-up on that, is you said you liked the old uniforms. That's what you grew up with. When they hit you in 99, you walked into the locker room, you got those crazy new uniforms. What were your initial thoughts when they told you to pop those babies on? Did you like them?
Yeah, I loved it. I did. Okay. It was because you got to remember when Elway won his 2 Super Bowls. Yep. The end of his career. Yep. It was after the Broncos had switched. Yeah. They had switched to those new uniforms. And that was a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. I remember people saying, that they somewhat looked like that a little bit, or kind of had that feel to them. And so I was like, hey, Elway just went out and won 2 Super Bowls in those uniforms, and everybody liked them. So heck, we got some new uniforms now too. So it was great. We loved it. But even though we got a new uniform design, we still had a home uniform and an away uniform. right? It wasn't a week to week to week, a
Yeah.
chrome to a carbon to a
Right.
lightning to a, those ugly highlighter, things to the wings to the diamond plate. You can go year to year, and they've had some crazy stuff, but we still just had, kind of the biggest thing for us was the helmets, that iridescent, because the way they framed it was, and I don't know if you've ever seen them up close. Those helmets were an iridescent green, but it was modeled after an actual mallard duck.
Oh, yeah.
As you see the water come off of the mallard, it kind of changes color. And there's not quite a purple, but there is like this different color that hits it as the light and the water hits it. So that's what our helmets were, which was really the coolest part of those original uniforms.
Yeah, that's a fascinating detail with the mallard. Yeah, the duck's feathers, mallards particularly famously, as they shift in water and sun, take on a different hue. That's a really cool paint job. Yeah, they definitely were thinking this stuff out. All right, now that we got past the important stuff, let's go into some of the secondary issues here.
Like football.
Yeah, that uniforms here, everything else just somewhere beneath.